Ever look up at the night sky and you just get that, like, feeling, awe,
Yeah.
wonder, maybe even a little bit of fear, just thinking about how big it all is?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tonight, we're diving into a story that takes that feeling, that unknown, and it just, like, cranks it up to a whole other level.
Yeah.
The story of Betty and Barney Hill.
Right.
And they were allegedly abducted
Yes.
back in 1961.
1961.
So picture this. You're driving home
Okay.
after a nice relaxing vacation, just enjoying the quiet of a starry night, and then, bam, something unusual catches your eye. It's an object in the sky, and it is not moving like anything you've ever seen before.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly what happened to Betty and Barney Hill.
Right.
Now, they were a couple from New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Just a normal couple.
Right.
And they were just coming back from their honeymoon.
Okay.
They had been to Niagara Falls and Montreal.
A classic trip.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about this?
What's that?
They weren't like those typical UFO people.
No.
You know, the ones that are always chasing lights in the sky?
Right.
Right. They were just an ordinary couple.
Average people.
Involved in their community.
Yeah.
They had jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Down-to-earth people, by all accounts.
Level-headed.
Exactly.
Not attention seekers.
No, they weren't looking for fame or anything like that.
Right.
Which, to me, makes their story even more compelling.
It does.
Because why would they make this up?
Yeah, it adds a certain weight to it, for sure.
So it was September 1961.
Okay.
The Hills are driving through the White Mountains.
Beautiful area.
Oh, yeah, enjoying that last bit of their trip.
Yeah.
Darkness falls, and Betty sees something in the sky.
Okay.
At first she thought, oh, it's just a shooting star.
Makes sense.
But this was not like any shooting star she had ever seen before.
How so?
It didn't like streak across the sky. It
Right.
just stopped,
Yeah.
just hovering there silently.
Huh. That's strange.
And right away that, sparks their curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
But also a little bit of unease. Like, what is this?
Right. Was it a plane?
Some kind of weather balloon?
They were trying to figure it out, but nothing seemed to fit.
And it didn't move like a plane or a balloon or anything?
Right. It was just so different.
So what did they do?
Well, they kept watching as this object, and they described it as large and cigar-shaped, started to move closer.
Oh, wow. So it's getting closer to them.
Uh-huh. Can you imagine?
Oh, I'd be freaked out.
I would be too. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's dark. This thing you can't explain is coming towards you.
Oh, that's scary.
I mean, I can just feel the tension mounting.
Right. They must have been terrified.
I would be too, trying to figure out what you're seeing, and it's becoming more and more clear that this is not normal.
Not normal at all.
No. And Barney, he was always the more like logical one.
Right. The practical one.
He's trying to come up with a rational explanation,
Sure.
but then he uses binoculars.
Uh-oh.
And he sees something that just chills him to the bone.
What was it?
Figures.
Figures.
Looking out from windows.
From windows in this object.
In the craft, yeah.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
Imagine you're on this quiet road miles from anywhere, and you suddenly feel like something is watching you.
Yeah, something you don't understand.
Something you can't explain.
That's a primal fear right there.
It is. It's like that deep-seated fear we all
That
have.
vulnerability. Yeah, when you're faced with something completely unknown.
Exactly. And for Barney, that fear was very real.
Yeah.
He was terrified, even though he tried to stay calm, for Betty's sake.
Makes sense. You don't want to scare her even more.
Right. So they decided to try and outrun this thing.
To outrun it.
Yeah, just pure instinct.
Yeah, adrenaline's pumping.
And this is where their story takes an even stranger turn.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
They experience what we call missing time,
Missing time.
a period of several hours that they can't account for.
They just don't remember.
Like it's gone.
Wow.
They have these vague memories of a roadblock
Okay.
and this weird buzzing sound.
Buzzing. Like electrical.
Yeah. And then suddenly they're much farther down the road hours later than they should be.
So like time just vanished.
It's like a chunk of time just disappeared.
That's mind-blowing.
It is. And it's this missing time that makes their story stand out.
Yeah, because it's not just a quick sighting. This is like a whole chunk of their experience is just gone.
And it makes you wonder what happened during that time.
It really does.
And it wasn't just the missing time.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. They found these weird, shiny spots on their car.
Shiny spots.
Yeah. And when they put a compass near them, it would spin like crazy.
So something messed with the magnetic field.
It's like something interfered with it.
Wow, that is strange.
And then you have Betty's nightmares and flashbacks.
Oh, no.
Vivid and disturbing.
So she's having these terrifying memories even after they get home.
Yeah. And it just adds another layer to this already strange and unsettling experience.
It's interesting that they had that physical evidence.
Yeah.
Because it kind of makes their story a little more believable.
Yeah.
Like, it grounds it in reality.
It gives it something tangible.
It's not just their word against everyone else's.
Exactly.
They have something to show for it.
I can't imagine what was going through their heads, though.
No kidding. Trying to reconcile what they thought they saw,
Right.
what they felt with, like, their everyday lives.
I gotta mess with you.
Oh, yeah, big time. And they were hesitant to share their story publicly at first.
Especially Barney.
He was really involved in the civil rights movement.
He was.
And he knew how people viewed UFO stuff back then.
Yeah, it was taboo.
He worried about his reputation and his work.
I can understand why.
Yeah.
It was a huge risk to talk about something like this.
Absolutely. People would think he was crazy.
And it's interesting how their story connects with what was going on in the world at the time.
How so?
Here's a man fighting for social justice.
Right. Equality for everyone.
And yet he's afraid of the judgment he might face for saying he saw a UFO.
Oh, wow. It's like those two things clashing.
It is, and it really highlights how taboo UFOs were back then.
Even for someone who was already going against the grain, fighting for what he believed in.
Exactly. But eventually they needed answers.
Of course.
They had to try and find some explanation for what happened.
So what did they do?
They reported the incident
to
the Air Force
Wow.
and to NECAP,
Kneecap.
the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena.
So they're taking a big leap of faith here.
They are hoping that someone somewhere might have an answer for them.
Makes sense.
And it was this search for answers that led them to one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story.
Oh, what's that? Hypnosis.
Hypnosis, to try and recover those lost memories.
Yeah, exactly. They underwent these hypnosis sessions with this renowned psychiatrist,
Who was it?
Dr. Benjamin Simon.
I've heard that name.
He was skeptical at first, but as their sessions went on, he became more and more intrigued.
That's interesting. We have to remember that back then, hypnosis wasn't as widely accepted as it is now.
And using it to recover memories was, and still is, pretty controversial.
Yeah, it's like their case brought all these different elements together.
Like what?
The personal, the scientific, the societal.
Right.
It's like a snapshot of that time
Their early 60s.
when our understanding of the universe was really starting to change.
Yeah, we were going to space.
And the possibility of extraterrestrial life was becoming more and more something people were actually considering.
It wasn't just science fiction anymore.
Right, and the details that came out during these hypnosis sessions were just captivating.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about that.
We'll dive into all that right after this. Stick with us.
Welcome back. Before we really get into what Betty and Barney said under hypnosis, we got to remember one thing.
What's that?
Those hypnosis sessions, they were done separately.
Separately.
Yeah, so they couldn't influence each other's stories.
Oh, that's a good point.
It adds a layer of credibility, don't you think?
I do, because you're looking for those little details.
Exactly the stuff that wouldn't be there if they were making it up.
Yeah, like those small things that you wouldn't think to include if you were just trying to invent a story.
And that's the crazy part.
Right.
Even though they were hypnotized separately, their stories had a ton of overlap.
Oh, really?
They both talked about being taken aboard the craft, going into this round room, and then these physical examinations.
See, this is where it gets really interesting for me.
How so?
You got to remember, this was 1961.
Right. Way before all the alien movies and stuff.
Yeah, the idea of alien abductions and experiments, it was all very fringe.
Like science fiction.
And that's what makes their stories so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
They weren't just copying something they'd seen in a movie.
Right.
They were describing something totally new and scary.
So what kind of details did they give?
Well, Betty talked about this really detailed examination.
Okay.
Like they took skin and hair samples.
Oh, wow.
And get this, she even described having a conversation with the leader of these beings.
A conversation.
Yeah, she called him the examiner.
Hold on, wait a minute. A conversation? What did they even talk about?
According to Betty, this examiner, he showed her this star map.
A star map.
Like a 3D map of the universe.
Wow.
She said he pointed out where their home planet was and even talked about all these different civilizations out there in space.
That's wild.
I know, right? And when I first heard about the star map,
Yeah.
I was pretty skeptical.
Really?
Yeah, it sounded like something straight out of Star Trek.
I get it, but there has been some research on that map,
No, really?
People have tried to match it up with real star systems.
Let's go.
Some think they found some possible matches, but it's still up for debate.
It's like this puzzle,
Yeah.
You have this incredible story,
With so much detail.
but it's so hard to prove.
Especially with hypnosis. It's not exactly foolproof.
Right, and we have to consider that.
But what's interesting?
What?
Dr. Simon, the psychiatrist,
Yeah.
he really believed them.
He did.
Yeah, even though he was skeptical at first, he said they were being totally sincere.
Wow.
He even compared what they were going through to PTSD.
Like what soldiers experience.
Exactly. He said they showed the same kind of trauma.
So if we say for a minute that their experience was real, what does it all mean?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. Does it mean we're being visited by aliens with technology we can't even imagine?
It makes you think about our place in the universe.
It does. Like, are we really alone out here?
Big questions.
I go back and forth,
I hear you.
Part of me wants to believe.
The mystery is exciting.
It is, but then the other part of me needs proof.
Something concrete.
Exactly, and in this case, we may never have that certainty.
That's true.
But even without proof,
Their story still has power.
it does. It makes you think
And it reminds us of how much we don't know.
about the universe and about ourselves.
Because their story, it's not just about aliens.
What do you mean?
It's about how we react to the unknown.
Oh, yeah, the fear, the confusion.
Trying to understand something that doesn't make sense.
And it shows that even when we're faced with something that shakes our whole understanding of reality, we still want to find our place in it all.
We want to connect. We want to understand.
It's a reminder that we're all explorers, in a way.
Navigating the unknown.
Exactly. And sometimes those journeys take us to places we never expected.
Places that change us forever.
We'll be right back to talk about the impact of the Hill story and what it means for our understanding of UFOs and, maybe even life beyond Earth.
We're back, and, it's impossible to talk about Betty and Barney Hill without talking about how much their story impacted everything UFOs.
Yeah, they really captured the public's imagination.
It went way beyond just seeing something in the sky.
Yeah, this was like a full-blown encounter.
They had physical evidence missing time, and all those descriptions of the aliens and the ship.
It's like their story became the blueprint for all the abduction stories that came after.
Yeah, the medical exams, the talking to the aliens.
It's everywhere.
Has become a staple of UFO stories. And it's interesting to think about how their story, which was so unique at the time,
So shocking.
it's almost become normal now.
Like we've heard it all before.
Right, which just shows how powerful their story really is.
But didn't their story go public without them wanting it to?
It did. A reporter went to a private meeting where they were talking about it.
Oh, wow.
And he published their story without their permission.
Can you imagine?
Having your deepest fears, your most private moments suddenly in the headlines,
That must have been so tough for them,
especially for Barney.
with his worries about his civil rights work.
It makes you wonder if they would have come forward at all if they knew it would happen.
Yeah, if they knew how much attention it would get.
And sadly, Barney passed away in 1969. He was only 46.
That's way too young.
It is, and his obituary focused so much on the UFO incident.
Really?
It overshadowed all the amazing work he did for civil rights.
That's a shame because he was so dedicated to fighting for equality.
He was a true advocate for justice.
And it's important to remember that part of his legacy.
Absolutely. His work deserves to be honored.
But Betty, she kept researching and talking about UFOs for years after Barney died.
She did. She became a big name in the UFO community.
Going to conferences, giving talks, writing books.
It seems like their experience really changed her life's path.
It's like she turned something so traumatic into a way to learn and connect with others.
She was searching for answers, trying to make sense of it all.
And I think it's really admirable that she used her experience to encourage research and discussion.
Whether you believe their story or not, you gotta respect their bravery.
For speaking out, sharing what happened to them.
They started a conversation that's still going on today.
And that's what makes the Betty and Barney Hill abduction so fascinating.
It makes us look at what we know and what we don't know.
It makes us ask the big questions.
Are we alone? What else is out there?
It challenges everything we think we understand about the universe.
And about ourselves.
Because their story isn't just about aliens.
It's about how we face the unknown.
The fear, the curiosity, the need to make sense of things we don't understand.
And it reminds us that even when we're confronted with something that completely changes our view of reality,
We still want to find our place in it all.
we want to explore, we want to understand.
So what do you think happened to Betty and Barney Hill that night in the White Mountains?
Was it aliens? Was it something else?
We might never know for sure.
But their story keeps us asking those questions.
It keeps us looking up at the stars and wondering.
And that's a pretty powerful thing.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. We hope you enjoyed it.
If you want to hear more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe and tell your friends.
Until next time, keep exploring and never stop asking questions.